I've been paddling the Mulberry for 35 years, and I still think it's one of the prettiest rivers in the state. It's just a great river and just a great jewel for the state of Arkansas, I think.
It's just a wonderful river. It's just got a lot of excitement and pretty steady action. The best whitewater river in Arkansas.
The Mulberry is a river that has enough sections on it that you can take complete beginners all the way up to intermediate boaters, and you can find a section that they can work on and improve their skills at all different places along this river. Some of the rivers in Arkansas, they would be too hard for the beginners, and some of the rivers would not be challenging enough for the more intermediate boaters. So the Mulberry has it all.
Anytime you can catch the Mulberry at around 3 feet, you got perfect water in the Mulberry.
My favorite thing about the Mulberry is, one, it's a good mix. You've got nice pools where you can relax and chill out if you want to, but then you've got the rapids where you can hit it. You've got the upper part that's a little bit more technical, and you kind of got to get after it. Then you got the bottom part that's got a little bit bigger water, and you can't beat big water. I mean,
I can still remember how I felt 30 years ago on a pretty chilly day in April. I had driven up from Louisiana and getting on this river, and it was probably, it wasn't even gauged properly then, but I'll bet the river level was 4 feet or so. And gee, we were flying through these haystacks and just boom, boom. Just, the canoe was coming 2/3 of the way out of the water, and my bow man would reach for water and wouldn't even hit, he would just be air below him. We had a blast.
While canoeing the Mulberry River, it's one of the more interesting aspects of the trip is not only the river itself, but the wildlife that one might encounter while flowing down the river.
It's unique in its own way, just everything from the color of the water to the diversity of the wildlife and plants.
It's the atmosphere, it's gorgeous, from top to bottom, it's beautiful.
Falls here, one of the most sacred spots on the whole river. This is a place where all of us would come and surf. We would do crazy stuff. The more you float, the more good times you'll have on the Mulberry River. Woo! Yeah!
We love the water quality, the rapids. They're areas that we can really work hard on and enjoy. And we like visiting with Canoe Club members. This is a central spot of the state as far as whitewater, and they come out of Fayetteville, Fort Smith, Clarksville, Little Rock. It's a general spot that we all enjoy.
Frequently after rains, this river will run when all the others are not running. And so it's an excellent training and practice river. It's got something for everybody.
I've done it since I was 4 years old, and my daughter's been doing it since she was 3 years old, and we just love it, absolutely.
it's some of the best water in Arkansas.
The rapid is great.
Waters of the Mulberry run through my veins.
The rock here, this was all deposited back in the Pennsylvanian about 250 plus million years ago. It was all sourced from the north, came flowing down from the supercontinent. This was all material that was dumped in south of the equator, is where this spot was. These are very fine-grained sandstones. Overall, they're silica cemented, so they're very hard, very abrasive, and hold together very well. The Mulberry River was trapped in all this Middle Atokan sandstone that was deposited by a large fault block that is formed in this area. This was all massively deposited in really a fairly short period of time geologically. Around the Arkansas River Valley, that area and down south toward the Ouachitas opened up during this time period to a depth of over 4 miles deep. And when it did, all this sandstone had a chance to, that's where it wanted to go. So a lot of sand in this area, big sand wedge that opens up into the Arkansas River Valley.
Well, this is an illustration of the Mulberry watershed, shows the location and shape of the watershed. It starts up in an area here on Highway 21 flowing to the west. A place called Fallsville is the top of the watershed for not only the Mulberry, but the Big Piney to the east and Buffalo River and White River to the north. The river flows approximately 62 miles down to the confluence with the Arkansas River, and it drains an area of approximately 400 square miles. And as you can see, most of the area is from the north coming down into the Mulberry. And the little Mulberry here, and the main Mulberry, this little Mulberry drains an area about as big as the main Mulberry. It's north of Clarksville, Ozark, and Mulberry, in between Highways 21 and 71 over to the west, with Highway 23 running through the middle of it.
This area has been subaerially exposed since the Ouachita orogeny, and that's when the Ouachita Mountains collided in and formed that mountain range, exposed this area. So there hasn't been deposition in this area for over a couple 100 million years. So since that time, this area has been eroding, and this river has eroded all the way down to its present state. This is a large plain overall that comes off the Ozark Dome, and a lot of what you see that's interesting out here geologically are erosional features.
This area was originally Osage country, the Osage Indians, and this was a part of their territory on the north side of the Arkansas River. And while we were in Arkansas territory, acquired this in 1803, I think it was around 1820, whenever they negotiated with the Osage and got the territory away from them. But at the same time, they were trying to get the Cherokees out of Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi. So they worked out a deal where they gave the Cherokees a strip of land between Fort Smith and Russellville that went up to the White River, kind of diagonally. This was a part of the Louisiana Purchase whenever they bought it in 1803 from France, and then but after the railroad got it and they started selling it off, they didn't sell it all. So what was left was kind of the beginning of the Ozark National Forest. They took and made that purchase from the railroad, and then the government had a program of buying up farms and started buying up a lot of farms and filling in the gaps. And so when you look at a map of the Ozark National Forest today, you'll see a lot of sections owned entirely by the forest, but you'll see some white spots on there where there's still 40, 80, and 100 acres that will be privately owned.
My family's lived in Franklin County for almost 200 years. Back in the old days, there wasn't very many people on the creek, and we pretty much had it to ourselves and did a lot of hunting and fishing along the banks and camping.
We've got some real fond memories of this place. Our roots go back in Franklin County, which was originally Crawford County, but it goes back 1830s whenever first one of my great-great uncles came. The original store at Turner Bend was my grandpa built it, and we built it right up here around the well. The well was on the porch of it. In 1935, they built the bridge here, the steel bridge that we have across. Now the other one was just steel with wood planking. Whenever they built this bridge, they see it changed the road, and it cut right through Grandpa's place. Grandpa's corn crib was right up here. In 1935, Grandpa and his brother, Uncle Gilbert, built a new store, and it was a kind of it's all wood, and had painted it white, and Dad had tourist cabins. We was raised right in the back of the original Turner Bend store that was up on the where Brad's got the store now. But the first store was right just above us where we're sitting here. We grew up on this creek, and right here in front of us was our bathtub. had a little set of steps come down here and jump in the creek. Daddy had a campground. We had a place to, place to build a fire, and they could camp out, and then put electricity down to it where they could have a plug-in. But so there's a lot of people would come by and camp, spend the night.
People have been paddling this since probably the 50s and 60s. I think the first group were probably Margaret and Harold Hedges and the Ozark Society back in the early 60s.
I think we'd get about $5 a car. We'd take people's cars up the river for them and drop them off and bring them back, or take them and spot their car down the river so they could float down there. They had started floating, but it was not a big thing. Mostly the recreation of the Mulberry was swimming, because see, we didn't have public swimming pools. Right over here across the creek, that was kind of a sandy bank, and on a weekend that would be full of swimmers.
I was here in the late 60s a few times and met and spoke with Mr. Turner, and of course canoeing was very new in those days. There weren't a lot of people around. There were people who came from some of the larger metropolitan areas that had the knowledge and canoes and the money to buy the equipment and came here on the river. But it was still very unusual in those days to have any kind of consistent canoeing.
Canoeing really started about 30 years ago. I do know that there is lots and lots of people that are coming here to the Mulberry for recreation and relaxation and really, really enjoying it.
The canoe season, we like to say it starts in early March. We have our river cleanup in early March, and then immediately following that we have our annual Jungle Boater canoe race. And so we try to kickstart the season in early March, and there's some people come in March, but in reality we don't start getting real busy until April. And the further into April and then May you go, as long as the water holds up, the busier you get, especially like when school's out. But the season's short here on the Mulberry. Typically, by the 1st of summer, we're lucky to still have water.
Everybody talks about the upper part because there's actually more whitewater. It's smaller, but there's a lot more of it.
The river would need to be more in the 2'3" range to have a good float up at Wolf Pen. It's definitely more like a stream or a creek up here. It's fairly consistently narrow and not near the flow up here as it would be if we were on the bottom third today. And we're up above the confluence of the Little Mulberry right now, which is most of the time, Little Mulberry seems to contribute about 50. It's about 50% as big as the Mulberry is. In other words, when they combine, it's 1/3 of the water, and the Mulberry is 2/3. I'm just guessing. Under normal circumstances, when they come together. Well, there's a couple of rapids below the Little Mulberry, but above High Bank that, probably definitely two of the more challenging rapids on the river. Pretty steep gradient, up here 16 feet per mile or thereabouts. The pools aren't very long. Several named rapids. This is, perhaps the most challenging stretch of the river. You got Jump Start Rapid, Big Owl's Twist, and Chainsaw Jungle Rapids right back to back almost, and then on down lower, Hoop and Holler, which is not a particularly difficult rapid, but it's a lot of fun, and a lot of tight curves. The river's a little tighter, does more winding and twisting up here than on the rest of the river. Kind of sneaky up here. They like catching eddies. They're not going to pass up a good eddy, it looks like. Whenever they come downstream, whenever they turn it around, that'll be called a peel out.
I really like the Mulberry whitewater because some of them are more difficult enough that you can really do some harder moves on them and really practice, but they're not so hard that you get that real tension level that you can sometimes get with a lot harder whitewater. you can still just enjoy it, and it's, you know the consequences are very minimal if you happen to make a wrong move. So that's what I like about them.
I like it because if you do have a problem, there's a road right next to the river, so you have access to getting out.
This is a ford right here. It looks just like a rapid to most people, and it is, but it's used as a ford. Well, ford is a place where people have traditionally driven across the river, dating back even before automobiles. People forded the river with wagons and mules and their livestock. And back before people paddled the river for fun, fords were one of the few things that people named on the river. Their interest in the river was, well, where do you go to get across it? So there would be fords like Yale Ford or Milton Ford or Ham Ford. And then they would also name the holes of water, the Anvil Hole, for instance. Because that was where their interest lay, in the certain holes of water that they fished in and the places where they could cross the river. They had no interest in getting on the river and riding down it like we do these days, and so the naming of rapids is a fairly recent phenomenon. When we made the map of the river, Lloyd floated it with topography maps in hand at a little bit lower level than this, and noted each shoal on the map like this would merit a one red stripe. And so he took note of each shoal as he went down the river, and then if it was a really significant or named rapid, it put 2 stripes there. It would also kind of signify, well, like this is a class 1 rapid and some of the others were class 2 rapids. Well, that's the Little Mulberry right there. Okay, there's your confluence. There's the Little Mulberry coming in. That has changed a lot in the last year. It used to flow right in here. Now it's cut that whole new channel over there. As you can see, it's a pretty big stream. I mean, it's rivals this one in size. We call this Moonshine Ford. The property owner on the left is Hyatt's. They probably call it Hyatt Ford because of its proximity to an old whiskey still site. That's why I nicknamed Moonshine Ford. Guidebook that was put out decades ago, the Mighty Mulberry, described the rapid they described fit that rapid, and they named it PhD, piled higher and deeper. Yet they're on their little map that accompanied it, the arrow pointed kind of between this rapid and the next rapid, and over the years a lot of people referred to the next rapid as PhD. Now the river does strange things up here. It's kind of splits into 2 forks, and you can take the left or you can take the right, and I don't know which one's going to have the most water today. We'll go over to the right here, although it looks like either one would do. And this is a named rapid, Big Owl's Twist, and it's probably at its most challenging at a level about like we're doing today. So. There's a mixture of public and private land up and down the Mulberry. Now most of the land that drains into the river is U.S. Forest Service property, and about 50% of the land that borders the river is Forest Service. but that leaves 50% that's privately owned as well. And so you see a few camps and a few no trespassing signs and some purple paint. Boaters have the right to be on the river. They're not trespassers when they're on the river. But of course you don't have the right to pull out and camp on private land or have a picnic there. And a lot of times, most of the time even, it's impossible to tell whether the land joining the river is public or private. Most people that own property, like property we're passing, don't make a big issue out of trying to post it, because boaters are, as a rule, not looking to intrude upon their places anyway. They're just looking to paddle on by.
It's been a pleasure now for years and years to carry the water down the mountainside, running from east to west, downhill on a sticky path, carrying memories that never die. And I say, take me to the water, y'all, that mountain water that's carried us down, 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 making the sound of the soul highway, the sound of the waters that carry me high. It's here I want to stay, moving along the soul highway.
This is High Bank. We're coming up on the High Bank canoe access. That path leading down the river, that's the access there at High Bank. There weren't even these steps. When we first started using the spot, there was a log jam at the chainsaw jungle and we couldn't go above, and so we started just pulling in and putting boats here at this place. We started putting in, we said, well, you know, if we're going to keep doing that, we got to have a name for that spot. What are we going to call it? It's got that tall bank there. Hey, High Bank, let's call it High Bank. It had the steeper bank that we would slide the canoes down. And this is named Jump Start because so many people launch at High Bank, and right off the bat, they have to jump right in and get started with this rapid.
I would say that one of the most important things is be safe. Make sure you check the levels before you go on the river. Know your skills, know your ability. I think one of the things that happens the most is people do not understand the dangers and hazards that are on a river, even at a moderate level. And so most of the accidents happen to the unexperienced paddlers on a moderate day.
This is an unnamed but nice spot.
Carry us all down the mountainside, running from east to west, downhill on a sneaky path, and we're making memories that never die.
That's called Zeke's Headache there. Back behind that boulder there, there's a sharp eddy. They call that Closet Eddy because it's as tiny as a closet.
I think they come out here for the beauty of the state of Arkansas and the river and the scenery around, and it's just all the nature that's out here. It's one of the best places in the state, and honestly, a lot of people that live in Fort Smith and Fayetteville don't even realize it's out here. So it's a great deal, and we just got to get the word out, but it's a beautiful place. We're going to go through this rapid and try to not turn over, okay? Maybe we'll hit an eddy up here, okay?
Yes, every river's got a tributary called Indian Creek. Well, we've got ours, and it's a real pretty creek, pristine. Forest Service owns virtually all the land on Indian Creek except right at the mouth of it, and real nice place to hike. The Ozark Highland Trail is not far from here, and it goes through a real pretty spot nearby.
Hoop and holler, it's one of the best surfing rapids on the river, and I guess people going through it hoop and holler, and that's how it got its name. It's one of the most popular surfing rapids on the river.
Now it's traditional that you let out a hoop and holler as you go through here. Woo-hoo!
I would recommend that people get a little instruction before they get on the river if they're really totally a greenhorn. And the second thing I would recommend is that when you get in the rapids, you get down on your knees and lower your center of gravity.
Woo! That is one of the favorite surfing spots around.
We started the business on Memorial Day of 1982, and we had a tornado that weekend that destroyed, or didn't destroy, it scattered all of our canoes, and they were all in the river and everywhere else. Brad and I went into business the same year, 1982, and before then, Wayfair with Brad Thomas was the only outfitter on the river, and then in 1986, I believe, we bought Wayfair, and then eventually we made a rental cabin out of it. We started with a very small amount of campground, no electricity, no nothing, just primitive camping. And right now we've probably got 15 acres in camping with electric and water. There's so many good memories, so many great people that we've met down through the years, and we have a few that's still coming back that started with us in 1982.
The most significant thing I think about Mulberry is just how natural it still is, how it's not been spoiled like so many other rivers in the area. Fortunately, there's not too much upstream from this area. I think that has a lot to do with why it's become so popular. It's just about as natural as any Ozark stream you can find. I guess one of the things that makes it so such a popular canoeing river too is the fact that the water stays up longer than most streams. It's a big watershed, lots of tributaries, a lot of excitement, nice eddies at the right water level. This is the head of Troll Shoal. Because of the bridge, there used to be a troll here that collected a fee when you came through. We're coming up on Low Water Bridge. The most important thing for people to know when they're paddling the Mulberry probably is that you can get in trouble really easy. Keep your head about you and look ahead of you before you leap. This is the Huggins Field, one of the favorite dispersed campsites along the river. It's always fun to explore a new channel the first time. Redding Campground on the right. It's beautiful, handicap accessible, nice little spot with lots of campsites. Right in the middle of the upper level of rocks, there's a rock that was cut into the shape of the state of Arkansas. The rapid that's coming up here next is called Mine Hole. This rapid is called Cedar Bluff. This is one of the places that changes in the river channel has been really drastic. The current used to take you right into the bluff. In some ways it's a little easier, but it did create some pretty good holes. I think just the fact that you can enjoy the natural setting in most places. There's not a lot of clutter, not a lot of trash, there's not a lot of houses along. Especially on most stretches of the river are fairly isolated. This next little rapid here is called Wide Right Turn. Our friend Jim Sarton named this one after us. My last name is Wright. Well, as you can see, it's actually more of a left turn. So he called this the Wide Right Turn.
Don't you know we can stand anything? And I say, let it rain down, let it rain down, let it rain down, let it rain down on me. Baby, creek will ride. Let it rain down, let it rain down, let it rain down on me. And everything's gonna be just fine.
And this is Bennett's Rock. Nice little place to go play, swim in the summertime. Great place to surf. There's a really good surfing hole. The community of Cass is just ahead about a quarter of a mile where the Job Corps Center is. Lunch Rock on the left. Favorite place for picnicking.
Let it rain down, let it rain down, let it rain down, let it rain down on me. Baby, the creek will ride. That would be just fine. Let it rain down, let it rain down, let it rain down on me. And everything's gonna be alright.
This is Fane Creek that comes in right there at Cass.
This is the Sacroiliac Rapid. At 2-3, you have to go right up by the big rock. At 3-3, the river is wider and there's more room to miss the big rock.
Cool, calm, and collected. You just float right around it. People panic and lean upstream and they go up under the rock.
I've had a lot of fun right here over the years.
We'd stay at Sacroiliac and we'd watch people bang into the rock and we'd hold up numbers. Like they used to have for gymnastics at Olympics where they'd hold up the numbers, rating their crash. That was hilarious.
I enjoy getting to know a lot of really nice people and being able to live at this on this beautiful river here.
Well, you know, it's really neat because Dad and Mom started out, a young couple here, building it up, and Dad had cabins. He'd rent them for $2 a night. Mom would do the laundry. They had one little run room, no bathroom. And they started building and build up the store. Dad whitewashed the trees, but then they raised us kids. And then Brad bought it, and he started improving. And he and Ben got married and started raising their family. And really, you can see they're putting. It's a labor of love that you see from the facilities that are built. These are all hand done. It's not been done with large machinery. Brad's business here with his canoe business. So there's a lot of people come by and camp, spend the night. You couldn't find a better vacation spot for those that enjoy the outdoors.
This is the gauge here at Turner Bend. It's just a simple treated 2x6 strapped to the old gauge that was hooked to a tree, but it's served for over a quarter of a century now as a gauge. It correlates with the Corps of Engineers gauge that's 23 miles downriver. They should read approximately the same level, taking into account for the level of other tributaries. So let's say a surge of water came through at Turner Bend and it's not at Mill Creek yet. We would be reading higher than they would at Mill Creek that day, and then maybe the next day they'd be reading higher than we were as the river falls. But all things taken into account, the gauges are meant to be the same. We have marks on this 2x6 every 2/10 of a foot. So, for instance, you see right now the river is just below the 2-foot line. So we would call that 1.9, or to be more specific, I think we called it today 1.95. So instead of measuring in inches, we measure it in tenths, or 2/10 of a foot. The gauge goes to 1.6. Anything below 1.6 is sure enough low water with a lot of dragging. 1.9 is pretty decent low water floating. We quit renting canoes right at 4 feet, 4.2, right in there. At that point, the river's starting to break out into the trees that border the river, and a real heavy current. Not necessarily that much more difficult, but just you're in for a long, fast swim should you turn over at that level. The good intermediate range is in the that most everybody can enjoy is like from about 1.9 to let's say 2.9, and then once you get up to around 3 feet to 4 feet, it's pretty darn challenging. Pretty swift. The waves get bigger. At lower water, there are more rocks to dodge, and some people find the river to be more challenging, let's say at 2.3, than they would at 3.3. At 3.3, it might pass right over the rocks that would be an obstacle for you at 2.3. It's a ritual. Every morning that the river's running, we come down and read this gauge, and we post it on our website, turnerbend.com, and that's very commonly visited by everybody to get a reading of the river's doing up here at Highway 23.
Well, it doesn't get much prettier than today. 2.5 and sunny. Good grief. This is perfect. The section, the Turner Bend to Campbell's, probably Rocking Horse and Picture Book will probably be the most challenging. The S's can be, and if you take the right channel at Wishbone at low water, you have to navigate between a lot of rocks. They call it the Rock Garden. It's the old name for that side. But we'll take the left channel. Hams can be pretty challenging. And then what's great is right after Hams, when you make that curve, and I don't even think it's not named, it's that rapid past Hams has these beautiful haystacks. They're just wonderful. Great standing waves. There are so many shades of green. That sounds like a line out of a song. When you get up to the S's here, it's going to be a sharp turn to your left, and so you got to be set up for that. Sometimes in higher water, you really got to watch your eddy line. This is a good place for people to dump that aren't on their knees. It's important to get on your knees and set up the canoe. When you go into the rapids, have it set up with your boat pointing a little bit to the left so that you can navigate that curve. And then it's going to cut back to your right, but it's a lot more open there, so it's easy. The water does funny stuff right in here too, when it's big water. Most people know it as a little eddy, because it's eddy right before big eddy. Great place to lay in the creek. This river will get into your blood. You know, the Celts talk about those thin places where the distance between our reality and eternity is so thin that there may not even be a division in between them, those thin places. This river is a thin place, a magical place, soul highway. That's right. Yep. It's beautiful. Valley of Love. Now this is Wagon Hole we're going into right here. And it used to be a ford, but obviously the wagons didn't make it. Because the hole down underneath it supposedly had a bunch of wagons in it. Call it Wagon Hole. Yeah, there's no telling how many wagons are in this hole. Then I came to the Mulberry, and my soul hadn't left since. I moved away a few times, but now I'm back. It's that first time on this place, it was just magical. The river's beautiful and it's absolutely gorgeous, but the people and the river together make this river what it is. That's absolutely the case. It's both the people and the river together make it a magical place. And it takes both. One without the other, it wouldn't be near what it is. This is Mill Pond, a great little takeout here. It is an enchanted river. I could describe it all day long, but you have to be here to experience it all. Yeah, it's a shoal after Mill Pond. Watch out for that strainer. If people haven't ever been on a river like this, you know, this isn't a dam-generated river. It relies on God's creation to create it. It's got a rain. A river that isn't so commercial either. There's two outfitters, and you know, and the family at Turner Bend, and the family on the river, the people who live up and down the river. It's a special place. And everybody needs to come down and check it out. And the other thing about it is when you come, you can't determine what the weather's going to be like, what the level's going to be like. All those things are all part of the rhythm of creation. That's what makes it special too, makes it sacred. This is Cane Bluff. There'll be a big, huge bluff after this. The bluff around this corner is magnificent. It's a lot bigger than this one. And actually on the map, that's the one around the corner is what they call Cane Bluff. Yeah, on the map, this is Cane Bluff. Beautiful. The whole area is Cane Bluff. I mean, you just know this part. This is that part of the Mulberry. We're coming up on Rocking Horse and Picture Book. Yeah, this is Bucksnort here. Yeah, we're gonna drop off right into here to Rocking Horse and Picture Book. This has to be some of my favorite rapids. I mean, I love them all, but I really love these. These are so awesome. It is one of the most gorgeous rapids, the way the rock formations are, the way it turns. And then after it turns, it doesn't let up. There's Rocking Horse is the first one, and Picture Book is the second one, and it goes right by a cliff. Both of them together make really one great stretch of the river right here. The water's beautiful because of the rocks. And you'll notice how it just kind of gets a beautiful, more blue tint down there. And it's just incredible. There's a big old field. We're gonna paddle right past this humongous field. And it goes all the way down to where the river bends right there at see where the mountain is? And it stops right at the edge of that. And then we're gonna turn, the river goes right, and that's where Face Rock is. Big smiley face, which will be obvious when we see it. This is Pink Rock right here. This is Wishbone right here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna drop in off to the left. You don't want to go right here. If it's any less water than there is today, you definitely don't want to go right. But we're going to drop off into the left. And in the old Mighty Mulberry, they called that the SOB. And it's so gorgeous. There's two great hazards in there. You can see what they call that the rock garden. Woo! And this is the pool that never ends. Some people started paddling not knowing what it was, and they'll continue paddling forever just because it is a pool that never ends. Yeah, this is Milton Ford, Big Piner, they talk about a long pool. This is a long pool. You gotta try to stay in the channel as long as you can. All the help you can get in this pool. Well, welcome, definitely. This is Milton Ford. This run, Milton Ford to Campbell's, is the one that definitely, I think the majority of us have done more than any other stretch simply because of hams and learning how to surf. When you get to hams, go right. Yeah, go right. Don't even think about going left. If there's any rapid on this river that's a sacred rapid, this would be it right here. This is Hams. 1.9 is a perfect level at Hams to surf. Absolutely perfect. If you've never floated it before, the one thing that you want to watch out for, well, when you're coming in, don't be discouraged by the trees. You're going to want to stay close to that island in the middle because you're going to want to drop down right in here. You don't want to drop down on this side of the river, but stay right there. Now you could go on the other side, but why would anyone want to do that? This is where you want to go. This is what you pay the big bucks for. This is why God created this side like this and that side like that. But seriously, when you drop in, you'll want to make sure that you're heading down to almost that center section, like that. And don't worry about the big waves. Even if you do tump, it's a very forgiving pool. This place is one of the most beautiful spots, mainly because, like the river, people gather here. And we'd float from Milton Ford to Campbell, and we'd stop here and stay here all day long. You can't get enough of it. There's a very strange hole right up in the top of this, or halfway in the middle of this bluff right here. That's most strange. This is Campbell's right here. It's a great access point and a campsite here.
We're on a section from Campbell Cemetery to Mill Creek. And as you can see, there's forest on both sides here. And it's, I like this section of the river the best, to tell you the truth. That's from Campbell to Mill Creek. You have the more water is in the river, because this is the lower end of the river. I think the scenery's the best. Less people down here, more to see. This rapid right here is called Hell Roaring Falls. Actually, it's the biggest drop on the Mulberry. It's about 3 feet. And you know, you want to get down on your knees, lower your center of gravity, have a low brace ready, and get a little power so you make it through the waves, and you'll be all right. That's the start of Rotten Rock. And coming up is Anvil. They call that the Anvil Rock. But that's a real pretty spot. Okay, the river right now is at 3.4, and for a trip down at this part, that's real good water. Next rapid up here is Tombstone. Down at the bottom, see there's a bunch of rocks, and if you end up on it, they call it Tombstone. We don't want to end up on it. They call this Coonfoot Crossing right here. I like it just for the isolation. Less people, I think the scenery's the best. There's a lot to see down here. And there's a lot of rapids down here. We're going to get into a bunch here in a little bit. But once you get past that, there's 4 or 5 really good rapids before you get out at Mill Creek. Right around the corner here, it'll be what they call King's Hole. Off to your right is where Spirits Creek is coming in. It's a little creek coming in, a feeder creek for the Mulberry.
Shores Lake was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps, and it dams up 3 creeks, White Rock Creek, Salt Fork Creek, and Hurricane Creek, all run into the lake there. And then as the water emerges from the lake, it's called Hurricane Creek. The dam itself is quite a piece of work. Many hundreds of rocks that were hand-laid to form this dam. It's the only tributary on the Mulberry that's been dammed up.
At least half of the river is owned by individuals. It's still in individual ownership, and we got a lot of businesses that operate on it.
Blizzard Springs up here has gone into the business with the rental cabin, which is really unique. It's the old house, and he's totally redone it, and it's just really unique. The Mulberry Mountain's gone in as far as a lot of rental cabins up there.
Mulberry Mountain also holds large festivals and events annually.
The Arkansas Canoe Club was formed in 1976, and I started working with the Arkansas Canoe Club in their whitewater school, what has come to be called the Whitewater School, in 1977.
Normally we have about 125 students. It's over the years, it's transitioned from many open boaters to more deck boaters now, kayakers. It's an introduction to whitewater paddling and safety and doing the things that you need to do on the river to be safe and have fun and to learn skills like eddy turns, peel outs, forward and back ferries, and how to manage your boat, river safety, from putting your boat properly on a car or a trailer to taking it off on the river and then putting it back on your car, everything in between, including first aid.
Well, we have the sessions at the beginning of every May. We've had it for 34 years. And we really have a lot of fun with socializing and building a network of different boaters across the state. And it has become probably the major event of our Arkansas Canoe Club.
This is Wrecking Rock. This rapid is called Shakedown.
I mean, an awful lot of people think the Arkansas Ozarks are some of the prettiest part of the country. And if you live in the midsection of the country, let's say you live in Kansas City or Dallas or Shreveport, Monroe, this is one of the best streams you can get to, best whitewater streams, especially if you live in Oklahoma or Kansas City. It's the first thing you can get to that's this quality of stream and this challenge too. I mean, there's more difficult rivers in Arkansas or streams, but you have to catch them right after a rain, and they're only up for a day or two, and you've got to really be skilled. This is for intermediate skills, in a river that's going to run for several days after you've had rain. Mulberry's just right up at the top of the list, and if you're in, let's say you live in Kansas, this is even though you got to drive 6 or 8 hours to get here, it's apparently well worth it to a lot of people.
It's got the shoe, that'd be an experience for people to come down and jump off the shoe. It's a big rock right in the middle of the river that's been a milestone on the river for a long time.
The bounding fault for the Mulberry actually is the bounding fault for the Arkoma Basin. This overall is just a great place to look at the actual rock that the Mulberry has to cut through. This formation is prevalent all through the lower part of the Mulberry, but around the Shores Lake, you have a large fault that kind of bounds it. We're here at Southbound Shoals. The Mulberry gets caught in a very large down-thrown block. It's down to the south on throw. There's over 500 feet of relief to it, and it gets caught in this big block with this big sandstone unit. There's quite a bit of gradient still in this part of the Mulberry. This is really considered kind of the lower canyon section. The significance of southbound is the river is now taking a turn. It's hitting this very large sandstone deposited feeder channel that we're standing on now, this ridge, and it hasn't been able to erode this ridge. So it then swings the river down south and headed toward the Arkansas River and ultimately the Gulf of Mexico. And the Mulberry was really created by the faults and the fault blocks overall. And kind of the interesting thing is Some of this land just down below us now was owned by an Arkansas electrical utility not that long ago, 50 years ago, with the thoughts of impounding it. This would be the area that they would place a dam overall, but it's probably the faults that'll save the river, because you don't want to build a massive dam on top of a structurally unstable spot like a faulted area. Hopefully this will keep the Mulberry free-flowing forever.
This rapid we're going through is called Bow Dipper.
You know, floating this river, you really are a part of the Ozarks in Arkansas. I mean, this is the best of the Ozarks on this river.
The Mulberry is a national wild and scenic river. It will remain free-flowing forever. Let it flow.